This is the brand new Nikon Z6 III released in August 2024. In today's video, I'll be unboxing it, testing its features, and comparing it head-to-head with my trusted Nikon Z6, which I've been shooting with since its release in 2018. The Z6 has been a workhorse for me, producing stunning photos and holding up impressively over the years. But as my projects have leaned more toward video, the Z6 has started to show its age, especially when compared to modern cameras. So it's time to upgrade. The packaging is typical Nikon. Though I don't recall my older cameras being packed in bubble wrap like this, it did make me question if I received a refurbished unit. In the box, we have the essentials: a battery, a strap, a USB cable, and its holder. However, one notable omission is a charger. It's no longer included. That was a bit surprising. Since I'm still using the Z6 for most of my photography and videos, I'll be doing a head-to-head comparison between the two. The Nikon Z6 III is a hybrid full-frame mirrorless camera featuring a 24.5 megapixel partially stacked sensor for superior image quality. It includes Nikon's best autofocus system, matching the Z8 and Z9 with advanced subject detection and low light sensitivity. Burst shooting reaches 20 frames per second in RAW format, paired with improved 5-axis in-body image stabilization, offering up to 8 stops of correction. For videographers, the Z6 III supports 6K 60 oversampled video, 4K at 120 FPS, and 10 times slow motion in Full HD with professional formats like ProRes RAW and NRAW. Its 5.76 million dot viewfinder delivers exceptional brightness of 4,000 nits and wide dynamic range, complemented by a fully articulating touchscreen. Now, let's start the comparison. The Z6 has been my main camera since 2018, and it's held up impressively well with a high shutter count. At first glance, the body of the Z6 III is nearly identical to the Z6. Without the labels, I'd struggle to tell them apart. That said, the Z6 III is slightly bulkier and weighs 90 grams, or about 3 ounces more. It's subtle, but noticeable when you're used to the lighter model. One of the biggest design changes is the screen. The Z6 III ditches the tilt display for a flip-out design. While this might be great for vloggers, I find the angles awkward. It doesn't tilt unless flipped sideways, which isn't ideal for my workflow. The screen size remains the same at 3.2 inches. But it's not able to tilt like this anymore, and I miss that. Moving on to the viewfinder, it has improved significantly, boasting 50% more dots and better contrast. Though I feel the viewfinder's contrast is slightly exaggerated compared to actual photos. The side connectors are mostly the same, but there are a few upgrades. The Z6 III can be charged via USB port, which is perfect for long time lapses or extended video shoots. It also features a full-sized HDMI port instead of a mini version. Bottom one is the remote control terminal. Same function buttons as on Z6. Behind the storage door, we now have dual card slots, one for Cfexpress cards and one for SD card. This is contrasting difference compared to Z6, which only has one XQD slot. It might sound scary for some, but I have to admit after 6 years none of the XQD cards ever failed. Another minor change is the repositioning of the play button, which has moved from the top left corner to the bottom right, allowing you to shoot and preview with one hand. The top display is larger, illuminated, and easier to read in bright conditions. One of the annoying things on this camera is the sound it makes when it goes to sleep. I couldn't find a way to turn that off. Take a listen. Both cameras seem to have similar specs. 24.5 megapixel, 3.2-inch monitor, using same battery format, only newer version. But there is much changed on the inside. Z6 III now has partially stacked sensor with 64,000 native ISO, uses XSpeed 7 processor, can fit up to 1,000 raw shots into buffer compared to 43, and the biggest and most important difference, the video capability. But let's get to that later and see how it performs taking photos. As you might expect, for photography, the Z6iii doesn't offer drastic changes unless you count the improved autofocus. As I mentioned before, the autofocus is faster, way more accurate, and excels at detecting eyes, people, and objects. I won't go into depths of it in this video though, as I usually use single-point autofocus with AFS on for most of my shoots. You can also shoot in the HF format as a backup to the secondary card and choose a RAW file compression. There's also a new pixel shift mode that lets you capture 97 megapixel photos by combining multiple shots in Nikon's software. It's an interesting feature for studio and product photography, though not practical for moving subjects. Another new function is a pre-release capture. I probably won't ever use it, but for someone who shoots sports or wildlife, it might a lifesaver. Camera automatically captures few seconds before you press the shutter button, so you won't miss your best shot. The only drawback is that those photos are only in JPEG, which I think kind of misses the point. Testing the dynamic range, the Z6 impresses. In this shot, I was able to recover both highlights and shadows with ease. Similar in this shot, you can see the patterns on the wood, the trees and sky behind the windows. Even at ISO 400, noise was minimal. Comparing this to the Z6, the older model struggles with overexposed highlights as it looks okay until you zoom in and see how bad it is compared to Z6. The Z6iii clearly has the edge here. Let's try photo from other angle. I am able to recover some of the outside, but definitely not the sky. That was pretty overexposed photo. Let's try something underexposed. Here I can definitely see the sky, but look what happens when I try to recover shadows. Yeah, it's pretty noisy. Z6iii wins in dynamic range over the old Z6. Not saying the Z6 is bad, as these SAMLs are extremes and would use bracketing for most of it. But with Z6iii, you might get away just with one shot, which is convenient, especially when you're shooting handheld without tripod. Now onto the Z6iii's most exciting aspect, video capabilities. This camera is a hybrid powerhouse, offering 6K 60 FPs recording in RAW. That's right, 6K video at this price point. You can choose between formats like Nikon's NRAW, ProRes RAW, ProRes 422, and H265. Each has its strengths, but compatibility with editing software may influence your choice. I was surprised NRAW isn't supported in Adobe Premiere. I will have to shoot in ProRes RAW format. Interestingly, ProRes RAW isn't supported in Resolve. With all the formats, you can switch between standard or log. Not all formats are available for all frame rates and resolutions and vice versa. I believe most used will be 4K 60 and 6K 60 anyway. The files will take a lot of space on the card, but we'll talk about that later. If you record in 4K 422, you can also capture the HDR videos in HLG format. The Z6iii's improved focus is mostly noticeable during the video shoot. I did a test with a model on the beach to show how well it can focus. Unfortunately, I forgot to take the model release, so can't use it in this video. Took the cameras to this little Airbnb apartment to see how they compare. Here's a side-by-side video comparison to show dynamic range. I'm shooting with similar settings, although I must admit the lens with FTZ on the Z6 isn't as good as the Nikon 1430. It shouldn't make that much difference though. This is a footage from Z6 and I think it looks pretty good. I shot it with the flat profile and after a few adjustments this would be ready to go. And this is a footage from the Z6iii. I know you must be thinking this isn't much improvement, but don't give up so fast. This is a different angle. Z6 looks pretty good again. Z6iii looks very similar. The differences are obvious when you start adjusting the footage. The RAW footage unlocks incredible dynamic range, allowing you to recover highlights and shadows. Take a look at the amount of information this video file has. If you try that with the Z6 video, this happens. Z6iii gives you new possibilities in color grading, exposure balancing, masking, and final product look. If you need to shoot slow motion, the Z6iii records at 240 fps in 1080p, delivering smooth cinematic results. Nothing I would need personally, but it's there and it looks pretty good. 4K is available, but only 120 fps. I understand there are many other differences between these two generations of the Z6 cameras. I just wanted to point out the most interesting. One of those is the new network menu, where you can connect the camera to many different devices, servers, or other cameras. What I'm still missing, though, is the GPS chip to have the photos tagged with the location. The Nikon Z6iii uses compact flash express cards instead of the older XQD format. While they look identical and share the same form factor, they're different internally. This means you can't use an XQD card in the Z6iii or a Cfexpress card in the original Z6 and vice versa. They aren't cross-compatible, and as expected, Cfexpress cards are significantly faster than XQD cards. However, this speed comes at a cost. Cfexpress cards are quite pricey, and if you plan to shoot in RAW, you'll need at least a 512 gigabyte card. To give you an idea of how much storage you'll need, recording in 6K at 60 frames per second in Nikon's NRAW format fills up an entire 512 gigabyte card in just 18 minutes. Switching to ProRes, RAW reduces that to only 14 minutes. For most of my work, I'll probably stick with 4K at 60 FPS, which gives me around 40 minutes of footage on the same card. Still, if you're planning to record long videos, it can get expensive quickly. Now let's talk about transferring those massive files. If you're used to downloading directly from the camera via USB, be prepared for a long wait. I tested this with a 150 gigabyte footage, and it took over 3 hours to transfer. This felt like USB 2.0 speeds, which doesn't make sense because the camera is supposed to support USB 3.2. To avoid this bottleneck, I recommend using a dedicated card reader. I had to purchase a new one specifically for Cfexpress cards, and while transfer speeds improved, it still wasn't lightning fast because my computer only has USB 3. This brings me to an important question to ask. Do you really need to shoot in RAW? Before purchasing, think carefully about your workflow and setup. Shooting in RAW isn't just about having a better camera. You'll likely need to upgrade your computer to handle these heavy files, which I'll be doing next month. You'll also need significantly more storage, both on your editing system and for backups. While the Z6iii excels in many areas, there are a few drawbacks. The flip-out screen, as I mentioned earlier, feels awkward and limits usability for certain angles. It's a pain to work with for both photography and videography. Look how weirdly it sits when open. If it was in the same angle as camera, I would be okay with it. But this way it's just few degrees off and I can't stand it, and few of my shots were tilted due to this. I know it's a personal preference, but it might be a reason I will be returning this camera. Second drawback is still the autofocus. It has improved significantly, but still lags behind competitors like Sony. The Nikon Z6iii offers an impressive set of features for its price point, especially the ability to record 6K RAW video at 60 frames per second for just $2,200. It's a fantastic choice for video creators who need high-resolution recording, improved transfer speeds with Cfexpress cards, and versatile shooting modes like ProRes RAW and 4K 60 FPS. The robust performance, paired with the camera's relatively affordable cost for its capabilities, makes it a standout option in its class. That said, it's not without its drawbacks. The display is something to get used to, and the autofocus system still leaves room for improvement. Additionally, if you're primarily a photographer, the older models like Z6 remain excellent options, as there isn't enough improvement in the Z6iii to justify upgrading to a new body. But for creators willing to work around these limitations, the Z6iii delivers exceptional value and performance, particularly for those venturing into high-quality RAW video production.
Welcome to the ASMR Zone!
And before you go, hit that subscribe button and smash that like button if you enjoyed the video. And don't forget to check out my other videos. Thanks for watching.